Welcome to part 11 of our D2L video series. In this video, we're going to talk about using the D2L Grades tool. In order to see this video well, you may want to click in the bottom right corner of your YouTube player and choose 720 HD as the quality level, and also open the video up to full screen so that you can see it well. The Grades tool can be found right here on the lower left corner of your D2L navbar. When you first click on the Grades tool in a brand new D2L course, if you've never set the gradebook up before, it's going to take you to the Setup Wizard by default. You can always re-access the Setup Wizard by clicking the Setup Wizard link on the left side of the Grades tool. You will need to run the Setup Wizard the first time that you're setting up your gradebook, but I do also recommend running the Setup Wizard every single semester. Even if you're copying your course content from another course, something that we've covered in a previous video, where you can move all of your content, including the grade from a previous semester, into this course, I do still recommend running the Setup Wizard again just to make sure the settings carry over in the copy. On this first page, we're basically going to see the default settings of how my gradebook's set up. In order to set the settings that I want to use in my gradebook, go ahead and go down to the bottom and click the Start button. The Setup Wizard runs you through 7 steps to set the settings that you want to use on your gradebook. The first setting is actually the most important one. You're basically choosing the type of grade system that you want to use in your course. The first option is to use a weighted system. An example here shows what that looks like. This grade system is used if you want to assign percentage values to each of your grade categories and grade items so that they tally up to 100%. The other option would be to use a point system, where you would assign point values to categories and grade items. D2L will simply add the points together to come up with the required amount of points for 100% in your grade. You don't actually assign any percentage values in a point system. D2L just does the percentage calculation for you. The other option would be to use a formula grade if neither one of these other examples will work for you. For this video, I'm going to choose the weighted system so that I can show you how you can assign weights to your different grade items, but if you're using a point system, it's basically the same thing minus the weighted values. So once you make your selection, go ahead and click Next. In the next section, we're going to be asked, what type of a final grade do we want to release to the students? You're going to be able to see the final grade at all times, but your students only see it when you're ready for them to see it. When you want to release the final grade to them, do you want to use the calculated final grade that D2L determines? Do you want to take the calculated grade, make changes to it, and then allow the students to see the adjusted final grade? Once you make this selection, go ahead and click Next. The next step asks, how do we want to treat ungraded items in our course? The default option is going to be to drop ungraded items. So if, for example, in your class you have 5 graded items, the student will start the course with all of them being dropped from the calculation. They take the first exam and they make an 80 on it. Well, now they have an 80 in the course because the other 4 grades are being dropped. This does allow you to see a running average of where the student's at throughout the semester, so it is a nice option if you want to be able to see that. The other option, treat ungraded items as 0, will assign a 0 to every item in the course that's not yet being graded. And then as you assign grades to the different grade items in the course, the student's average will rise. The auto update checkbox is something you will want to keep checked at the bottom because that does keep your gradebook up to date. I'm going to go ahead and choose to drop ungraded items and click Next. The next page will only show you percentage as an option by default. There is a way in D2L to build grade schemes so that you can assign a grade scheme to your merit grades instead of showing the actual number grade. You could have it show a letter grade or a pass-fail, something along those lines. You do have to manually build those grade schemes. It's not something that we're going to talk about in this video, but if it's something you'd ever be interested in, just give us a call and we can help you set it up. The vast majority of classes, the percentage grade scheme will work just fine. So I'm going to leave it on that and click Next. This next option asks how many decimal places you want to use in displaying your gradebook, but also in rounding the grade. If you were to choose 1, it would round the grade up. So 2 is the default setting. This page determines the visibility of your gradebook will look like to you. Do you want to be able to see the points grade, which is the point value that you're going to grade the students out of? Say, for example, you assigned a grade item 10 points. and the student made an 8 out of 10. That is the points grade. If you have this box checked, you will see that in your gradebook. The weighted grade is the weighted percentage that this grade item is worth towards your final grade or towards a grade category, which we'll talk about a little later in the video. If you have this box checked, you'll see not only the points grade of the item, but also its weighted grade. The grade scheme symbol is used if you want to show the grade scheme as well. In the previous step, we chose percentage as our grade scheme. So by picking this box, you would also see the percentage value of this grade item. And finally, the grade scheme color. If this box is checked, you're going to have a colored grid that shows up behind your grades. A grades have a bluish tint to them, B grades have a greenish tint, C grades have a yellowish tint, and so on. Finally, the only other setting that you may want to change here is the final grade calculation. If you check this box, the student's grade will be displayed to them at all times. Otherwise, you will have to manually release the grade. I'm going to go ahead and leave this off so that I can show you how to manually release the grade if you choose to. I'm going to go ahead and click Next, and we're now on the final page. This is giving us a summary of all the settings that we've made, and if I click Finish, my gradebook is now set up. Next step in using the Grades tool will actually be to build my grade items. The gradebook is basically broken down into 3 specific areas. One is the Setup Wizard, which we've just run through. The next area would be Manage Grades, which is where you actually build your gradebook. And the final area that we'll talk about in the video today is Enter Grades, which is where you'll see your students' names, you'll see all of your grade items, and you can assign grades to your grade items. So let's go ahead and click on Manage Grades and talk about that area. Okay, so here in my Manage Grades area, I actually have a very basic gradebook already set up. I did this so that I can talk to you about how the gradebook is set up, and then I'm going to delete this and actually build it again so that you can see how that's done as well. When building a gradebook, it's basically broken down into 2 separate things. You have a grade category, which you can see here is my tests category and a papers category. And then you have grade items. A grade item is the individual item that you want to grade a student on. So this would be something like test number 1, test number 2, paper number 1, paper number 2. Now these are very generic terms, but you can see how these relate to the assignments and the assessments that you have in your own course. Now because I'm using a weighted grade system, everything in my gradebook has to tally to 100%. So you can see here that I have 2 categories that I've built. I have a test category that is worth 40%. Now this 40% will be of my final grade, and I have a papers category that's worth 40%. That is 40% of my final grade as well, to make up 80% of my final grade. Now inside of these categories, I have built 2 grade items, test 1 and 2, and paper 1 and 2. Now these grade categories are set up a little differently. One of them I have set up to automatically distribute weights for me, and what that does is because my test number 1 and my test number 2 carry the same value in my course, each one of them is 50% of this category. So when you tally them together, you get 100% of this category. So just to recap this, tests are 40% of my final grade, and test number 1 and test number 2 tally together to equal 100% of this category. Now my papers category is also worth 40% of my final grade, but my papers are worth different amounts. Paper number 1 is worth 40, and paper number 2 is worth 60% to tally to 100% of the category's 40%. Now this only makes up 80% of my final grade. The remaining 20% comes from my participation grade in the course, which is built outside of a category. Now this is a grade item, and you don't necessarily have to build grade items in categories. If a grade item is outside of a category, its weighted value is towards the final grade. So here I have 20%, 40%, and 40% to equal 100% of my final grade. Now down at the bottom, I do have a bonus item that I've made, again outside of a category, and this bonus item is worth 5%. Now this will not count against students if I don't enter a grade for the bonus paper, but if I do, they can make an extra 5% possible on top of their final grade. So this has been a brief overview of how the gradebook actually works, and now I'm going to go ahead and delete all this and build it again so that you can see how to actually construct this in your course. Okay, so now I have deleted all of my gradebook, and this should look very similar to what you have in yours if you're just starting. I probably want to start by building my categories. Like I said a little earlier, you don't have to use categories. If you just want to build grade items your grade book, that will be fine. The only thing you have to take into account is that all of your grade items have to tally to 100% as the final weighted value. And it will tell you up here at the top what your grade items or grade categories are tallying to. So right now, because I have no grade items or categories, it's telling me that my calculated grades comes to 0%, not 100. So as I start to build items, this number is going to go up until it reaches 100%. So I'm going to start first by building some categories. I'm going to come up and click the New Category button, and you're going to get a page that looks like this. Now remember, just like in other areas in D2L, the red asterisk means a required field. So I'm going to build a category called Tests. Then I can scroll down and select the weight. The weight is towards the final grade. So if I put a 40 here, this category is going to be worth 40% of my final grade. Now the next option asks me, when I start assigning items into this category, how will they be distributed? If I leave it on manually assign, I have to assign the weight of each grade item that I put into the category. What I'm going to do for this category is actually choose this third option, distribute weights evenly across all items. If every single grade item in this category is worth the same amount, you can check this box and it will automate that step for you. What this will also allow you to do, because all of the grade items are worth the same amount, it will allow you to drop their lowest grade. So if I had 3 tests in the class and I wanted to drop their one lowest grade, I could simply type in a 1 right here, and now there are one number of lowest non-bonus items to drop for each user. This is going to drop one item from this category for each student in the class. I do have some display options down here at the bottom if I want to turn those on, where I can display a class average or a grade distribution to the students. Now I'm going to go ahead and click Save. If I click Save and New, it would allow me to actually just go ahead and build another grade category. So if you have 3 or 4 to build, that's just a little shortcut key for you. I'm going to go ahead and return back to my Manage Grades screen to see my test category that I built. It does tell me that my final grade sums to 40% now, and I can see that 40% right here. Now I need to go ahead and build another category. So I'm going to click on the New Category button, and here I'm going to build a category called Papers. This category is going to be also worth 40%, but instead of having it automatically distribute the weight for me, I'm going to leave it as manual so that I can show you how that works. Now I'm going to scroll up and click the Save button to build that category. When I return back to Manage Grades, I can now see that I have a Test category and a Papers category, totaling to 80% right here of my final grade. I now need to build some grade items in these categories, and these again would be things that I'm grading the student on. The grade item is actually where you would enter a grade for a student. So I'm going to go up to the top and click the New Item button, and I would do this for every single grade item that I need to build in the course. I'm going to have a listing of different types of grade items. 90% of the time you're probably just going to be using a numeric grade. That's something that you're assigning a numeric value to. But maybe one of these other grade items fit into what you're needing to do. For this video, I'm going to go ahead and just choose numeric. Now the name is the name of the grade item. I'm going to call this test number 1. Now watch what happens to my weight box whenever I select the category. Right now it does allow me to set the weight, but if I put this test grade item into my test category, the weight is now defined for me. Because this is going to be the only grade item in the category, it is now worth 100% of that category. The max points are the points that I'm grading the student out of. So if I'm grading out of a 100-point scale, I need to put 100 right here. Can exceed is where I can have it exceed 100 points. So if this were a test that had 105 possible points, I would need to check that box. And the bonus checkbox would allow me to make this a bonus item. I'll use this a little later when I build a bonus grade item. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save and New this time so that I can show you how, because I have multiple grade items to build, I can just go ahead and keep clicking Save and New, and it will speed up my building process. So again, I'm going to choose a numeric grade. This will be called test number 2. Now watch what happens when I put this into the test category. It now assigned a weight of 50% because it knows there are 2 tests in this category. This one's going to be 50%, and it will automatically assign 50% to the other test in this category. When I click Save, I can now return back to Manage Grades and see my test category that has 2 tests in it that tallies to 100% of my 40%. Now I'm going to go ahead now and build another grade item, numeric, And this time I'm going to build my papers. So I have paper number 1. Now when I put it into the papers category, because I didn't set this up to automatically distribute my grade for me, I have to manually assign the weight. Now remember, this does have to tally to 100% of the category. So I'm going to have one paper that's worth 60% and another one that's worth 40%. I am grading out of 100 points. So I can click Save and New, choose Numeric again, and now I can build paper number 2. I'll put it into the papers category, 100 points, and this is the other 40% of my category. I'm now going to click Save, and when I return back to Manage Grades, you can now see that I have my papers category that's worth 40% with 2 grade items in the category, but they carry different values. Now at this point my final grade tallies to 80%, so I have 40 and 40. So I need to build the remaining 20%. I'm now going to go ahead and build a grade item for participation in my class, but this grade item is not going to be in a category because you don't have to build one in a category. So I'm just going to click the new item. I'm again going to choose a numeric grade, and this is going to be participation. I'm going to leave the category option blank. I'm going to assign it out of 100 points, and it's worth 20%. Now when it's outside of a category, this weight is towards the final grade. So when I save this and return back to Manage Grades, you can now see that I don't have the message at the top because I have 40, 40, and 20. That's my 100%. Now if you wanted to add a bonus item, you simply do it the same way. I'm going to click New Item, Numeric, give it a title. I'm going to leave it outside of a category, but if you put a bonus item into a category, the weight value is towards the category, not the final grade. So think about that when you're building this. I'm going to assign it a point value, and I'm going to assign it 5%. So this bonus item can potentially be worth 5% of their final grade. You need to remember to check the bonus box down here at the bottom, and when you save this and we return back to Manage Grades, you'll see that this item has a star beside it. That lets me know it's a bonus item. It's not going to count against my students if I don't enter a grade for it. You can use these tools of new category and new item to build very complex grade books. So this is a great tool and it's very easy to use. If you're using a point system, just drop the weight column and everything else is pretty much the same. You can create categories in a point system, and you can assign max point values to the category as opposed to assigning it a weight value. So for example, you could create a papers category and say it's worth 300 points, and then when you put the papers into it, each one you could have worth 100 points of that category. Now the final section that we're going to talk about in the video is the intergrades area. On this screen, you're going to see a listing of your students' names. You can sort by first name or last name by clicking these icons here. As you scroll to the right, you'll see the grade categories and the grade items, and you also will see a subtotal for the category. So because my test category is worth 40%, I can see the subtotal of that category. Now as I scroll to the right, you'll see that the names of your students will repeat, so you don't have to keep scrolling all the way back. And at the very end, you can see your final grade. Now there are 2 ways to view this page and enter grades. This screen that I'm looking at is what's called the standard view, and in this view you can actually just see that these boxes are only visible, and it's not like a spreadsheet where I can actually click into them and type in a grade. The other view is a spreadsheet view, and you can switch to that right here. If I click this button, you'll see that it switches to more of a spreadsheet view where I can actually click in the cells and type in a grade. Now I'm going to show you how each one of these work if you're entering grades. On the spreadsheet view, you can simply click in a cell and type in a score for a student. Now if you have your grade item connected to other areas in D2L, such as an assessment, a Dropbox, or a discussion, which in other videos I showed you where you can make that association, the grade can automatically be filled in depending on the tool that you're using. So for example, if you had an assessment that was attached to a grade item and you were using all questions that could be automatically graded by D2L, when the student turns in their attempt, it will automatically fill in the grade book. But you can't always come over to the grade book and just manually type in the grades. When you do that, you'll type the grade in and then click Save, and then click Yes on the confirmation box, and you can see that grade has now been entered in the grade book. Now if I'm on the standard view it looks a little differently. You'll see right now that these grades have a small exclamation point beside it. That's because this is the item that's being dropped for that student, because I set my test category up to drop their lowest grade. Now if I wanted to enter a grade for test number 2 on this screen, I can't click in these cells. So what I have to do is click the yellow ruler for the grade item. Now on this screen you can see I can enter the grades in these cells, and I can also leave comments for the students. Now if I click here and leave a comment, the student will see that when they view their grade book. Now once I've entered grades, I can click the Save button and then again click Yes on the confirmation. Now it leaves me in the grade screen because it assumes I'm going to continue entering grades for other students. So to get back, I have to come up and click the Enter Grades button here on the left side to return to my grade book. Now you can see for my test category I have both grade items filled in. So you can see that each student is having a different grade dropped, and I can see the subtotal for each student. They both have a 90, but that's because one grade is being dropped for each student. If I scroll all the way to the right, I can see what the calculated final grade is. Right now you can see it's a 90 because all of my other grades are being dropped because of that setting that I made on the setup wizard. Now if I want to release the final grades to my students, I would come over and click the ruler on the final grade, and this is going to allow me to see what the calculated grade is right now in my course. It's a 90. Now if I want to release this to students, I need to transfer the calculated grade into the adjusted grade column. To do that, you'll click the Transfer All button at the top and then click Yes. That is going to move the calculated grade into the adjusted grade column. So each student is earning 36 of the 40 percentage points that they could currently have in the course, which effectively gives them a 90% right now in the course. Now I could tweak this if I wanted to for each student, and when I save, the students will now see this as their calculated final grade as opposed to the 90% that D2L calculated. Now in order to know that the student is seeing it, you are going to have to click the Release All button, and that's going to release the grade out to the student. There's a couple of other indications that you can look for to know if they're seeing the final grade. One will be this checkbox on the right side. If that's checked, the student is seeing the final grade. And the other indication is on the Enter Grade screen, and if you scroll all the way to the right, if you see a small eyeball beside the final grade, they are seeing it. If you don't see this eyeball, they are not seeing their final grade. Now the last thing that I want to show you is a setting that you can use if your student calls in and is asking you about a grade item. What you see is very different than what the student sees, and sometimes it's kind of helpful to see what the student is seeing when they're logged into D2L. To do that, you can click on the student's name. It's going to load up a page that you can just grade on that student. So here I could see just this student's grades, and I can also see any comments that I've left for the student. But at the top of this page there's a preview button. By clicking this preview button, it's going to pop out a window that shows me exactly what this student is seeing when they enter into D2L. I can see the final grade, their points, the weight achieved, which grade's being dropped, and even the comments that I've left on this page. Now this has been a very quick and brief overview of the D2L Grades tool. It's a great tool for getting your gradebook set up the way that you want it to be in your course, and it's very flexible in allowing you to set up the gradebook the way that you want to have it set up. This video concludes the D2L video series. I hope you've enjoyed watching these videos, and I hope that they've given you a good understanding of using these tools in D2L.